What's going on, YouTube? We're back with another video today, and today's video is going to be on this knife right here. This is a Sharp by Design Mini Tempest in M398. I believe this was a Knife Nuts podcast exclusive version of this knife. I think the other ones were an M390. This one is an M398, and I think there's a limited amount of pieces of these. This was sent in by a subscriber, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you for letting me, hold on to this for a while, test it, and just kind of see how I feel about M398. Before we get into the steel, I mean, the knife is super, super nice. It's a front flipper, which I'm not too good with. Nice hand-rubbed blade here, and it's got kind of a cool Tonto-esque shape. Definitely unique, built very well. It's built by Riot, so super nice knife. So let's talk about M398 here. It actually isn't marked anywhere on the knife that this is M398, which I thought was a little funny. But I think that's more up to the maker, Brian Nadeau, Sharp by Design, than it is Riot. I think that was probably his request not to have the steel stamped on here. So M398 is an extremely new steel in the grand scheme of things. It was just produced in 2019 and is really mainly a tweaked version of M390. It's very similar to M390, but just has more carbon and more vanadium. And the main purpose of adding those two elements is to add or form more carbides. Carbides equate to wear resistance, so the more of those that you have generally, the better wear resistance that you have. They were successful, obviously, in achieving more carbides in this steel. M398 has a whopping 30% carbide volume, which is more than almost anything else out there, and puts it in the upper echelon of carbide volume with steels like Rex 121 and ZDP 189. Because of that extremely high chromium content, 25% of the carbides out of the 30% are the less desirable chromium carbides that are just enriched with vanadium. They're larger and not as hard as the pure vanadium carbides would be. The pure vanadium carbides would give it better toughness and wear resistance than chromium carbides do. So, in theory, what's to be expected with this steel is high edge retention with a major sacrifice for toughness. Not that toughness really matters a whole lot in a folder like this, but M398 in theory should take a pretty big hit in the toughness department. So let's talk about some real use on this guy, starting off with sharpening. In sharpening, it moved relatively easily, but slower than some of the lower class steels like S30V, that kind of stuff. I wasn't really a huge fan of how the edges came up on it. And I mean, while it did get sharp, I never really got it to be super sticky like some other steels get. And it reminds me a ton of S110V, which I'm not really a huge fan of either. And this is starting to become a pattern for me with the steels that consist of primarily chromium carbides. D2, ZDP 189, S110V, and now M398 all have a similar feel and characteristic that they just lack aggression in their edges that the tool steel counterparts would have. So I can show you guys, even though it does come up sharp, I mean, obviously, no issue with sharpness. It just doesn't have this nice stickiness that some tool steels like K390, Rex 45, M4, that kind of stuff comes up with. I don't know about you guys, but sharpening is probably my favorite part of owning knives and testing them. And when a steel doesn't sharpen how you feel like it should, it kind of sucks the fun out of it. So while it does get plenty sharp, I kind of feel like it's lacking in that regard. On to the fun stuff, edge retention. So this is where this steel should hypothetically shine. All those carbides in there aid in the edge retention, and you should get some pretty superior edge retention out of M398. This knife is made by Riot, like I said, and they've been rumored to grind under coolant, so I wanted to test the edge for fatigue. So as soon as it got to me, I tested it. Off the factory edge, it did 347.67 feet of cardboard, which is very respectable, but a bit low for what a steel like this should be capable of. So I sharpened it at 18 degrees per side, which really wasn't that much different than what the factory bevel was. It really didn't take a whole lot of reprofiling at all to get it to 18 degrees per side. 200 to 1000 grit diamond, and strapped on 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather, and I ran another test. This time I got 439.83 feet. So an improvement, but that result still felt a bit low in my opinion. So I went back, sharpened it again with the same progression, and ran it for a third time. And on the third test, I got the exact same result, 439.83 feet. In my opinion, that's pretty disappointing for a steel that has this much carbide in it and a composition like it does. I think the potential is there for it to be much, much higher, but we got to keep in mind that this is a production knife, albeit a small production knife, and it isn't going to get crazy high attention to detail in the heat treat department like a one-off custom would. I think another thing to note is how fast the initial sharpness fell off. I've noticed this again with other chromium carbide based steels, is that the initial sharpness, that initial bite that the edge has, just falls off a cliff after 50 feet, 100 feet. It kind of, it depends on the steel composition really, but it falls into that working edge sharpness pretty quick. And once again, that is another trait that I'm not super fond of. This isn't as in-depth as other in-depth videos are for me. It's not my knife, it's an expensive knife, and I'm just grateful to have been able to test the steel and try it out. I wasn't really going to use it too hard at work and stuff, just because some of the particles and stuff that get on our cardboard bring scratches and stuff into play, and I'm trying to keep this knife as nice as possible still for its owner. But I feel like through the testing that I did on it, I got a pretty good feel of how this M398 performs. So in conclusion, I think M398 falls into the group of steels that I like, but don't really love. It's a good steel, better than most out there, but there's other steels out there that I would much, much prefer to this so far. I'm going to give Riyadh the benefit of the doubt and assume they use a somewhat safe heat treat here and probably didn't run it as hard as they could have. And it is one of the first production knives to use this steel, so that would kind of be understandable that they didn't want to take any risks with it. And this is obviously just based on one knife, and my opinion could change with future M398 and future knives. And if that's the case, I'll make a follow-up video at that time and let you guys know. Huge thank you to the viewer who sent me this knife. Really, really appreciate it. Awesome to be able to get a knife of, one, this quality, and two, in a steel that you don't really see very often in my hands. So I really appreciate that. That's going to do it for me today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below and subscribe to continue seeing more videos just like this one. As always, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.